Chapter 2. The Plight of Shael. The wind swept across the sand, occasionally flapping a curtain which hung from one of the dilapidated homes of Shael. Sullen faces of people looking far older than they were peeked out from behind the broken glass windows or the darkened holes cut into the sides of buildings. The town was filled with sadness and despair. A cloud of darkness hung over the mood of each and every person that Dave spied while strutting confidently through the town. A whistle passed Dave's lips as he belted out a beat to match his stride. Proud of his accomplishment and arriving at Shael, Dave was oblivious to the tragedy which had befallen this desert community. "Hey there!" he would shout through a beaming smile, pointing his fingers in a mock gun-like expression towards each and every broken human being who shuffled past him. Their shoulders hunched over, their eyes tracing the lines on the ground, these broken people seemed unconcerned about the stranger who had wandered into town riding high on his own emotional ignorance. Doesn't seem like they're into conversation all that much, Dave mused, standing still in the street and studying the sulking villagers. Dave attempted to reach out, connecting with the people of Shael. He would say things like, "Excuse me, can you help me find..." But by that point in the sentence, the villager had shuffled away, terrified to speak to our young hero. "I'm looking for a Mr. Zan. Yes, it says here I'm to deliver a package to a Mr. Zan. Anyone know where I can find this Mr. Zan?" He stood there, silent and waiting, holding the piece of paper in his hand which had the delivery name scribbled down upon it. No one reacted. "It says he can be found here, in the village of Shael. You know, your village?" Still nothing. No response. No sign that anyone had heard the young man or cared to answer. Dave faltered. He had never been ignored so completely before. I'm from UPX? You know, the package delivery. I've got a..." He trailed off as more villagers returned to their homes and shut their door. Dave needed to figure out how to reach one of them. Was this how it was in the wasteland? Was this how people lived? An abject fear of outsiders? He could hardly process life like that, considering where he was from. "Man, in Central they at least acknowledge you before they ignore you," he reminisced. With no other ideas in mind, Dave started getting more aggressive in his introductions. He would step right up to the villagers and reach out, trying to catch them before they scurried away. But each time he was unsuccessful. Each time he felt like he was getting nowhere. "They won't help you," came a raspy old voice from behind. "They've learned not to speak to outsiders, not after last time." Spinning around on his heel, Dave found himself face to face with an older-looking woman. Clearly a grandmother by the lines on her face. Dave could feel pain coming from her voice. "Why? What happened here?" asked Dave languidly. "That's not something I can answer, young man," the old woman hoarsely offered. "You'll need to speak with our elder to learn of our troubles." This seemed to be a positive outcome to his inquiries, and Dave beamed with a sense of pride. "Fantastic! Where can I meet this elder?" The old crone pointed a finger towards one of the homes in the village. It stood taller than the others by an entire floor, with more decorative cloth hung over the windows providing shade from the scorching sun. "Hey, I appreciate the help, Nana." As Dave spun around to walk towards the elder's house, he could feel the bony hand of the old woman on his shoulder, pulling him backwards. Nearly tripping over his own feet, the young man spun back around to the woman, his face now planted firmly, directly in front of hers. "I ain't no grandma, kid." She narrowed her eyes and spat on that last word. "I'm only 27 years old." At that moment, Dave Toriyama felt quite good about having lived his life in the city streets of Central and not out in the blistering heat of the desert. There was no way he felt he could pull off a wrinkled old face like the crone. She let go of the boy and slowly paced away towards her own hovel. Dave stood there for a moment longer, considering keeping his comments to himself the next time he met an ancient-looking mummy in the village like Shael. The wooden door creaked open, revealing a tiny man standing at the doorway. Balding, but with sprouts of white hair poking out from the sides of his head, the old man beckoned Dave to enter his home. "Oh, I'm so glad this was your house. I was worried I had the wrong place," Dave said, trying to explain why he had knocked so ferociously. It had nothing to do with being creeped out by the old crone I met earlier." The old man chuckled as they both entered his sitting room. Dave sat down on the world's oldest couch, likely safe from the war that ravaged the world 100 years prior. The old man poured a cup of tea for the both of them, then took a seat across from Dave. The old man's feet barely touched the ground, and the chair seemed several sizes too big for a man of his stature. "Lovely home. I like the, rarity of the pieces you have here?" That last one came out as a question. "I'm glad you've finally come. I've been waiting for you." The old man took a sip of his tea, as if to illustrate his sentence. Dave gestured to all of himself with a symbol point of the finger. "Me? You were waiting for me?" The old man nodded, a smile pursing his lips. "Not long ago, our village began suffering at the hands of the Shogun. They arrived demanding we give them what goods we've cultivated as a tribute." Taking a sip of his tea, Dave nodded. "We are a simple desert village, farming mostly from the cacti around us. We cultivate a mead from the cacti and use it in cooking what little vegetables we can grow on our rooftops. We can barely afford to feed ourselves most year, but the tribute that was required took much more than we had to give." Again, Dave took a sip and nodded. "Uh-huh, I see," he uttered, unsure how this pertained to his delivery. "Understand, we could not go on like this, not for another year. So some of the young ones, they decided to take a stand." The old man closed his eyes, seemingly remembering the event in his mind's eye. He appeared hurt by the memory, pained by the events that had transpired. "I am the village elder, and as such I am the chief in charge. I begged the children not to go, but they insisted on doing something rash." It suddenly occurred to Dave that he had no clue who this person was. "I'm sorry, what was your name? I don't think I caught it." Dave fidgeted, putting his teacup down on the table. "I am Elder Zan," the old man remarked. "Fantastic! I've been looking for you." Dave nearly leapt to his feet with such enthusiasm. He pulled a package from his satchel bag and handed it to the old man. "I believe this is for you. Now look, if you just sign here on my sheet, I can head back to Central and—" The old man stood up and began to pace around the floor. He never once reached for the package, which Dave continued to hold out in the air. "The young boy, Tamir. He can't be any older than you look. Well, he and his sister took a few other boys from the village who had strengthened them, and they went to the outpost." Still holding the package out in his hand, hoping the old man would take it, Dave side-eyed the elder, realizing only now that some task was about to be given to him. "Damn it, a side quest," Dave cursed, fully aware this would mean overtime. "Not just any old silly side quest, young traveler," the old man spoke, hauntingly and wise, "but one that will save this village from abject ruin. You are needed, boy. Needed here in Shael. Will you help us?" "Look, I'm sorry that your young have gone off and gotten themselves caught up with the Shogun. That sucks." "You bet your biscuit it sucks." The firm determination of the old man's face caught Dave off guard. "But this is my first delivery outside of Central City. I don't want to screw this up. I'm just supposed to bring this package here and then head back." Before Dave could finish, the old man had grabbed the package out of his hands and signed the paper. "There! Now it's your choice. You can go home, leave this village to its fate, and continue to live your life in the shadows of the world. Or you can—" He was cut off as Dave had turned and left the house. "Aw, fiddlesticks! I'm gonna have to do this the hard way, won't I?" Outside, Dave had made it several steps away from the elder's home, when suddenly the elder appeared in front of him. "Wait, how the—" Dave was legitimately confused. "How in the wastelands did you move so fast?" The old man snickered. "I move as fast as plot contrivances require. Now listen, sonny. I'm going to say this one more time in a language that you understand. The wasteland is calling for you. We need your help. Ignore us and condemn us to a fate worse than death. Can you live with that on your conscience? For several heartbeats, Dave stared at the old man with a stone-cold face of uncertainty. He knew that if he got himself involved, it might mean a very harsh fate for him and his family back in Central City. However, Dave could also not ignore such a request. He could feel the heart of this man, the pain that echoed from his soul, You didn't actually sign the delivery, did you? Dave looked at the sheet and realized the signature read, "Try again, kid." He sighed. Considering this meant he'd just have to return to the village and get a real signature anyway, he might as well do the right thing too. "Fine," Dave replied after a long silence. "I'll try and save your people." The old man smiled, showing off a considerable lack of teeth. The sun had fallen down behind the mountain range off in the distance, and Dave sat low and against the sand dunes a short distance away from the Shogun outpost. From this vantage point, he could see only one guard on duty at the main entrance. However, over the last hour that Dave had been observing the outpost, he counted no less than 5 different guards patrolling the area, though at this late hour, Dave could be sure most of them would be inside the buildings of the outpost and more than likely sitting down for some sort of dinner. I could go for a sandwich right now, Dave daydreamed. After a few more minutes had passed, Dave felt confident that he needed to act. Okay, we need a plan. I'm sure I could sneak around the guard, but I need to get this guy's focus elsewhere so I can knock him out. At that moment, young Dave Toriyama wondered if he even had the ability to knock someone out. I wonder, am I even able to knock someone out? He spoke aloud, chopping the air with his hand in a mock attack. What do you think? He asked you, the reader, who's been following his adventures now for 1.5 chapters. Alas, you have no way to respond to a written character, so your reply goes unheard by our fated hero, whatever it may have been. Deciding that there were no good ways to distract the guard with any serious form of skullduggery, Dave Toriyama picked himself up and attempted a Hail Mary pass in the form of fast-talking comedy. The guard had drawn his weapon and aimed it at Dave as he approached the man in the dark of night. Hello there, sir. A moment of your time." Upon seeing the approaching figure from the darkness, the guard had already leveled his weapon, ready for combat. It was, however, the sound of a 15-year-old's voice that gave him pause.
"Hold it! Who goes there?"
the guard shouted, confidently. It was at this precise moment that Dave had stepped into the light which was coming down from the outpost, illuminating the guard's position and highlighting the entrance to the facility. "Yes, sir, again I greet you and say hello. My name is Wadsworth Jingleheimer, and I'm here on behalf of the Acme Corporation. Now you, sir, look like the kind of man who needs beyond the typical ones. Am I right?" The sales pitch was seemingly going smoothly for Dave, he assessed.
"What's happening?"
The guard just stared at the boy, completely unaware of what to say next. After a longer pause than either was comfortable with, Dave continued. You see, we at Acme know about the hardships of the wasteland. Why, of course we do, and we want to help. Why waste valuable time and energy every day doing things that could easily be done with our newest product, the Acme Multi-Tool of the Wasteland?
"Please stop."
The guard stood rigid, confused and embarrassed at the interaction. Yes, well, our handy Acme Multi-Tool of the Wasteland can be used for almost any purpose. It acts as a knife, a spoon, a hammer, a razor capable of 2 full shaves before a refill of shaving cream. A big and tall toenail clippers, a 2-way radio, a mini fridge for all your wrapped chocolates, a greeting card printer. Taking up his rifle again and aiming it at Dave, the guard bellowed orders for surrender.
"Enough of this ridiculousness!"
Oh, I can see you've got a lot on your mind now. Perhaps I could talk to the lady of the outpost? Dave gave a sincere look at the guard, but was surprised at the response when the guard grabbed him by the shirt collar and tossed him like a rag doll to the ground. It comes in several bright colors, Dave rasped, struggling for breath.
"Enough! You're under arrest for violating a no-civilian zone."
Dave coughed, a foot now placed right atop the back of his neck.
I could come back another day this week if that would be helpful."
While his attempt had been poorly received, Dave felt confident he could have swayed the guard with a little more practice. Sadly, he wasn't sure he would survive this mission to try again. Inside the outpost, down a long and dirty hallway with very few industrial lights turned on in the dark of night, while a series of ominous chains hung from the ceiling with a chilling, otherworldly clanking sound as they swayed. Several young people from the village of Shael sat in cramped cells. Having been divided into groups of 2 or 3, most were very young children, older than 10 or 11. The oldest of the kids, a brother and sister who sat in the furthest cell from the door, were accompanied by the younger Zan, who himself was only 15 or so. These were the children of Shael. They had been captured by the Shogun when attempting to rescue the misbegotten gains of cacti nectar. You could feel the sadness from the younger children like a cloud of perfume, billowing through the air, piercing your eyes and stinging your nostrils. The sounds of muffled crying betrayed the almost peaceful silence inside the cells themselves. Tamir Shihab turned to his sister Dua after an hour or so of uncomfortable, quiet reflection and continued his arguments from earlier, which had led to the silence in the first place.
"We could have done it, Dee. We were so close."
Dua leaned against the bars as she had for the last hour, her arms crossed and her attitude angry. She refused to even look at her brother. "For the 1000th time, no. No, you could not have, Tamir. That's your problem. You really think you could have gotten away with, what, terrorism?" Raising his head to respond, Tamir opened his mouth only to see the hand of a young Zan raised towards him. Zan motioned for Tamir to be silent, as he understood that any further argument would not be good for Tamir, or for Dua, or even for the children who were listening. Tamir took the hint and became silent once more. From down the hall came a muffled laughter. Dua turned to look towards the doorway and could tell that the laughter was coming from the drunken squad of Shogun, who felt that they had clearly done a decent day's work. They were proud of capturing children and would likely be rewarded for their efforts. Sighing, Dua felt a wave of hopelessness that she hadn't felt before. She had failed to protect the children of the village. She had simply failed. With a sudden and almost paralyzing bang, the door to the hallway was thrown open as a Shogun guard dragged a body down the hallway. Dua stepped back from the cell bars as the guard approached, unlocked the cell door, and threw the body into the cell, closing the door behind him, and the guard promptly turned and left without a single word. On the floor between Dua, Tamir, and Zan was a young boy, around 15 years old, wearing a very dirty pair of clothes, and slung around his torso was a satchel bag. Slowly, the boy seemed to regain consciousness.
"No, yeah, that's what I thought you'd say,"
he groaned, trying to find his voice as the world around him spun.
"Who the hell is that?"
Tamir stood quickly, poised to strike if the need were to arise. Zan stood as well, though he seemed more interested in discovering who the boy was than reacting to an attack. Dua quickly dropped to the boy's side, helping him up and placing him on the bench in the cell.
"Thanks, I appreciate that,"
replied Dave, thankful that someone was treating him more kindly than a boot to the neck or a fist to his stomach. "Just relax." Dua sat next to the boy, holding his arm so he could get a handle on his surroundings, and for just a moment, Dave felt a wave of emotion like that of a mother or sister tending to a little child, and he blushed.
"Great, now we have to deal with a spy in our cell."
Tamir paced quickly, angrily. Zan attempted to calm him down. "We don't know who he is, so let's not jump to conclusions." Zan gave the boy a look, asking for some response with his eyes. "Spy? No, I'm not." "Hey, who are you people?" Dave was properly confused. "My name is Dua Shihab," she stated, pointing to herself, "and this is my brother, Tamir, and our friend Zan. We're from Shael." Suddenly, a recollection of his mission occurred to Dave as his neurons began to fire. "Wait, Zan? The younger Zan? Is your father—" "The elder," Zan finished the thought. "I was sent here to rescue you guys, to bring you home." Placing his face in his hands, Dave rubbed his eyes, then through his hair. This was turning out to be a very dangerous mission, and one which Dave Toriyama was not yet equipped to handle.
"You're here to rescue us?" scoffed Tamir. "By getting captured?"
A chuckle came out of Dave, and he looked with apologetic longing back at Tamir. "Yeah, this wasn't the brightest idea I've come up with." Dua frowned, worried there wasn't much context to this conversation. She needed to know who this boy was, why he was here, and if there was any reason for her and the children of Shael to trust him. With a calm and soothing manner, she reached out and put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Who are you?" she asked, finally. She stared into his ocean-blue eyes, waiting for a response. Looking at all three of the people in the cell, Dave felt an explanation of who he was and why he was here would take about a minute or so to explain. He took a deep breath and began to explain the kind of day that he was having. End of chapter.